I will move on to the next part, which is around the differences that we can find compared to the accounting taxonomy. And this is actually something which is quite important, especially to the SSP representatives, because ultimately when CIPC will be incorporating the SDT taxonomy into the CIPC taxonomy, some changes related to the software might still be required. They are not necessarily critical or how to say it, difficult or something like that. Changes. These are more probably things that the tools might be actually simply not supporting yet, because these were not necessarily visible in the CIPC taxonomy, but nevertheless, we wanted to highlight those to you, so we can actually speak out with the developers of the solutions and make sure that you are having these aspects on the radar, so that if next year the taxonomy will be out, your software will be able to accommodate these new areas. So in the staff draft that we saw in May last year, there was an introduction of the type dimensions. So as you know, dimensions in XBRL can be presented from, let's say, two perspectives. The ones that are, let's say, referred to as explicit dimensions are those dimensions that are having a subset of domain members that are allowing to break down a certain line item, a certain reportable field based on some sort of a classification. So this is actually one of the most commonly used type of dimension, where the issue where the reporting entity is presented with the complete and predefined set of breakdowns that could be used in order to disclose information. But there is also a second type of dimensions, which are so-called the type dimensions, where the information is actually not specifically defined or explicitly defined on how certain information can be broken down. Because in the context of type dimensions, the taxonomy is not providing the domain members that the taxonomy users can apply to disclose their information, but instead it is providing simply some sort of a placeholder that allows the users, the reporting entities, to type in their own values that would be considered as members that will be breaking down a given information, a given reportable field, given line item. The type dimensions are actually not that heavily used globally. In many cases, taxonomy developers rather want to close these breakdowns to avoid potential comparability issues, because obviously if the breakdowns are created by the reporting entities, there is a risk of these, let's say, typed members to not necessarily be comparable, because everyone would be able to define their own, would be able to, I don't know, type them in a different manner using different words. Even the lower case versus capital case would make a difference, because as you know, XML and XBRL as well is case sensitive, and so that can actually lead to some more tricky ways of establishing the comparison of such filings. So at the staff draft level, the type dimensions were proposed. However, as noted from the consultation paper, the market was a bit skeptic in terms of their application, and it was viewed as additional complexity, especially so that we need to mention that the IFRS accounting taxonomy does not make use of the type dimensions. Hence, requiring that could make some difficulties to the global community that is using the accounting taxonomy for reporting their financial information. and that would probably also lead to some additional development needs on top of the software side. So in the SDT taxonomy, the proposed taxonomy that was published in July this year, there was a decision that there are no type dimensions to be included in the taxonomy to ensure consistency on the architectural level with the accounting taxonomy. And instead, a slightly different approach would be taken, which is to apply the explicit dimension, but with the breakdowns that are not complete, meaning the domain members shall be created as entity-specific extension elements. Now, this can be viewed from various perspectives as a more complex operation for certain filers, especially in the jurisdictions that are not allowing for extending the core taxonomy, and CIPC is actually one of these jurisdictions that so far was not allowing for extensibility of the CIPC taxonomy. However, based on the feedback that the foundation was gathering, a majority of the respondents were more keen of still letting the users to create their own entity-specific domain members rather than just using the type dimension as a means of incorporating these breakdowns, which is something that will be actually quite an important thing to be discussed in the context of South Africa, because in the context of South Africa, the CIPC from the very beginning decided to introduce the type dimension. So this is kind of a not new functionality of XBRL, which is actually would be shocking the software vendors in South Africa. No, this is not the case. As you know, when CIPC was introducing their taxonomy, the idea was not only to focus on the simple adaptation of the IFRS taxonomy based on the IFRS full and IFRS for SME modules, but also to tackle some requirements stemming from the Companies Act and also some other acts and regulations that are incorporated in the taxonomy. And based on these requirements, we were seeking a need for introducing things like or disclosures like directors' remuneration, for example, in which there is a need to disclose in your financial statements the list of directors with all the remuneration that they are getting. And as we all know, there is no consistency in terms of how many directors are part of a given organization. So we were staying in front of the decision whether we should create some kind of artificial but still closed tables that would allow, 100 rows for which the entity could actually disclose the list of directors, or instead to apply the type dimensions, which would serve as a means of creating these tables as open tables, allowing the users to simply create how many rows that they needed. At the same time, without the need for creating a taxonomy extension. So we were having a lot of discussion back in 2015, 2016, also with the software vendor community, and the decision was made that the type dimensions will be used. So this staff draft from May was probably more convenient from the perspective of the way how we are defining the XBRL program at the CIPC, where no extension of the taxonomy is allowed. However, here what we are noticing is that the ISSB is moving more towards allowing for the entity-specific extensions for the users rather than just making these type dimensions, because from the perspective, and this can be read in the consultation paper, this would introduce a bit more complexities rather than the extensions, which are already known in quite a lot of the big jurisdictions like the US under the UCCC, where the extensions are allowed, or in the context of the European implementation, for example, where where extensibility is in fact required. Funny thing is that the US is actually allowing, if I remember correctly, the type dimensions. So they have both type dimensions and the ability to extend the taxonomy. So this is also quite a yet a different case. However, this is something that we will need to think a bit more. Obviously, there is a note, and you can see on the extract that I took from one of the slides that the foundation was sharing in terms of how these dimensions would work. There is a note that for those integrated disclosures that are not required to provide information for each risk and each opportunity, the filer will not need to extend such taxonomy and simply will be able to use the default member that you can see on the left-hand side and report this information as a non-dimensional table. However, this is also yet to be decided in how it would work in the context of South Africa. Either we go for extensibility, which was also mentioned by the commissioner in the opening speech, which might be the way to go, or alternatively, how this could be approached is that we would extend, if we decide not to allow extension on the taxonomy side, we would then potentially could replace these non-closed explicit dimensions with CIPC specific dimensions that would allow for the typing in the actual value. So there is probably some thoughts, more thoughts needed around that, but maybe I will also pause here and ask specifically the SSP representatives whether they were already aware of these things that are happening at the ISSB level, whether there are any thoughts within your organizations in terms of how to tackle that, and whether you have any preferences or recommendations to the CIPC on how this should be approached. So I'll pause here for a moment and feel free to jump in directly by speaking up or maybe posting something on the chat. We'll be happy to take that into consideration. Okay, so I see one comment. Yes, the scope of filers might be broader if the non-financial information required to be disclosed under the ICP standard become applicable to a larger community. Okay, so this is your response, sorry.
I guess, sorry, I'm new to attending this. I wanted to just understand, if you are a non-filer, is this really relevant for you, or this is relevant for people who are responsible for filing the financial statements?
So, so for the filers, it will be important, but it will be more important for the software vendor that would actually need to make relevant provisions at the level of the software that would allow certain approach to be followed. It is relevant from the perspective also from the regulators that intend to apply this taxonomy. Hence, we are also asking this question as the CIPC, because the route that we will take will actually impact how the software will need to be updated and how the filers will initially understand how to tag the information. So depending on how we understand non-filers as a regulator, as a software vendor, there will be probably different considerations needed. So yeah, that's the case.
Okay, so from auditors, because obviously from auditors, then we don't really get involved with this. It's a
So from the auditor's perspective, there will be just a note to take on how to read later on the statements, but this is more of a technical aspect that would not necessarily fall under the need to know, let's say, from the auditor's perspective, but perhaps Chuma have something to add.
No, okay. Yeah, Miha is right, and I know if you're wearing the hat of the auditor, the definition of filer might mean something else. But irrespective of which side of the table you're sitting on, it would be key to understand how the, let me say, the sign off version of the Fs were converted or translated into an XBRL document, and as to whether that translation retained the integrity of what you had audited in your capacity as an independent auditor. And then the person who uploads the file must be confident that what they are uploading is consistent with what they received from the company on behalf of which they are uploading, supposing that it's outsourced. But nevertheless, because this is a business aspect, or rather the disclosures are business disclosures, not necessarily software service provider disclosures, it's key that we also, I mean, we're sitting as a regulator, but at the end of the day, what we're looking for is the relevance or reliability of the business-related disclosures that we're seeing in XBRL. So yeah, it's really depending on which part of the filer definition you're applying when you say non-filers versus filers. But we are all affected, whether we are filers as we speak or we're going to be filers in the future. Supposing that my definition of filer is the same as yours. Maybe we need a taxonomy to define what we mean by filer. But anyway, all is well. As there's a question there.
Thanks
Esther?
for the clarity. Thank you.
Cynthia, are you answered?
Yes, yeah, I think it makes sense. I guess I'll just have to think about it from audit perspective. Like you're saying, once we've signed the audit report, then they convert it for filing with the various regulators. And what are the implications from the audit side? Because I guess that's the main question that I can take back to my organization. Like you talk about the integrity of what is filed, because it links back to the audit report.
Yes. 100%.
And what it also may be important is that regardless of the approach that we would take here, whether the type dimension or explicit dimension with allowing of the extension elements, the result from the auditor's perspective, or the people that will be looking actually at the data, will be actually quite the same. There will be just a different mechanism, technical mechanism on how this information will be reported. So mostly important for the vendors and the regulators that will be designing their taxonomies rather than the actual users of the data. And we have a question from Esther.
Good morning. I've actually lowered my hand. I just wanted to find out, because my understanding is that all companies that report as per IFRS will have to include this information in their financial statements. So, I mean, this information will form part, as I understand, of the financial statements, and it will have to be audited. So I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, but this is kind of how it's going to appear in the financial statements. This provides basis, and we are going to have to look at it from an audit perspective as well, if I'm not incorrect. So maybe just a clarification from your side on that.
So I'll let Shuma maybe to respond to that one.
Yep, Esther, I think that's the actual, ideally that's what would ordinarily happen. But the framework as it exists now, the ISSB's framework, does not prescribe where the sustainability report must be disclosed, or whether it's as an annexure to financial statements or actually as part of the core primary financial statements. So that's the problem we're actually sitting with. And because there's no pronouncement, or there's no explicit pronouncement by them that this sustainability report must be part of primary financials, they just said it must be published together with primary financial statements, but it didn't prescribe that it's actually part of financial statements. So then that's what we were concerned about, and also FRSC. FRSC was saying, I mean, they a statutory body that provides guidance from a South African perspective on financial reporting. Non-financial reporting is not yet within scope of the FRSC's mandate, and hence a need to broaden the FRSC scope to make some pronouncement as to whether where we do accommodate sustainability disclosures as part of primary financial statements or not. The other problem that we will sit with, also back to Cynthia's question, is if we're looking at financial statements as a standalone, which have been impacted by a sustainability report, which has not been audited, how do we then, make or have proper assurance on the financial statements? Because you have it means you have two separate audits then, but the version of the representation of the reporting entity is just the financial statements. I had made an example of potential abuse of fair value measurements. I mean, hierarchy level 3, I think. Yeah, level 3 fair value measurements might be abused in that. I mean, a company can just devalue an asset because of some unobservable climate-related aspect or variable, which according to them is justified, but because it's level 3, you have no way of, agreeing with them when you as auditors say, no, but you should have rather used level 1 or level 2. So there's those inroads where there is absence of assurance on sustainability reports, which I think ILBA will champion when we finalize the working groups. But otherwise, yeah, you had ideally, or you had your understanding is the ideal, but it's actually not the prescribed disclosure method. So there is a need for the country to make that pronouncement that the sustainability report must form part of financial statements, supposing that we adopt and implement it according to how it has been designed as at this stage. Cynthia still has a hand up, but I think I hope I've answered you, Esther.
Thank you so much. Yes, you did. Thank you.
Fantastic. Sorry, I just want to just follow up from Esther's question. From my understanding, this is because the entity will have produced their financials anyway to TP. So this component of taxonomy is only for filing. I guess that's where I'm a bit lost, where it's only for filing. So when we're doing the audit, we're really auditing based on other systems that the entities have. And after that, they compile the Fs. So will the Fs that we receive from audit be the Fs that have been produced using the XBRL, or it's XBRL only comes after for filing? I guess that's where maybe, or is there an intention to have? Yeah, I guess that's where do you place XBRL in the whole organization's system of reporting?
Yeah. So one note on that, just kind of a really good question on how to review later on the information disclosed. But the good thing is that the standard that was followed by the CAPC is actually not the raw XBRL, but inline XBRL, which is actually kind of allowing us to have a report in form of a human readable, let's say, version of that report, which is at the same time machine readable, because inline XBRL will actually be presented as a XHTML document, which is basically a kind of a web page that you can open in any of the modern web browsers, like Google Chrome, for example. And that will actually allow you to see all the narrative parts without all the technicalities that I'm describing right now, because these will be simply embedded within the code of what you will see with your own eyes without any particular knowledge. So we will have a finding that will be both readable by humans, without the need of any specialized software. But it also be read by machines, so it could be later on analyzed in an automated manner and so on. So my assumption is rather than you would not need to actually investigate the technicalities behind that, and you'll be able to review it from the perspective that you actually see on the narrative parts.
Yeah. I think, and as a footnote to that, it's actually in terms of current common practice, in terms of your audit working papers, it will follow the same thread, or it will follow the same process where, I mean, because the sustainability report must be published at the same time with financials, you will have had a chance to audit the parts of sustainability reporting which have an impact on the financial statements. So it will happen as a parallel process and then submitted, or rather converted or translated into XBRL for filing to the CIPC as part of the Companies Act requirements, and also possibly other regulators, supposing that at the time when we do go live, or rather when we do implement, we will not have yet finalized the multi-regulator taxonomy to eventually just have filers submit one instance document that gets consumed by various regulators. So in essence, your audit scope will be expanded to include sustainability reporting, but then the documents themselves, or let me say the XBRL documents themselves, are not necessarily the document you audit. You audit the disclosures, or rather the document, the data and information that feeds into the financial statements, and then make your pronouncements on, I don't know, qualified audit or unqualified, emphasis on matters, etc., and key audit matters. That is what ordinarily you would sign off on. And the XBRL component is just a digital representation of that which you already have made a pronouncement on in terms of your audit. So yeah, that's that.
It's fine. Thanks, Chuma. I see there's also Stefan with.
Yes, apologies, Stefan, for holding you, but I guess that was also part of the same discussion. But go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Michal. No, my question is more the non-type dimension. You know, it feels like, you know, it's a very, you know, entity-specific information. So, you know, think about the risk for a construction company could be a bit different to the risk of a financial institution. So I think, you know, so the comparability is tough, and therefore, you know, I can understand you need to define your own sort of code. However, my question is more like, is it the same rule then for the emissions, which is for me a comparable code?
I think actually for the emissions, there are already predefined categories that will actually close these breakdowns, but we would need to have a closer look at the actual content of the taxonomy. I was just using this as an example on the risk and opportunity side. But yes, this is a good option, regardless whether this is a type dimension or a explicit one with the entity-specific extension elements. The outcome would be always that there will be potentially some lack of consistency or comparability actually across different sectors, which may have a different looks at that. But this is again something that is also kind of bound to, you know, how broad this information may be, and how flexible the standards will be in terms of how we can actually disclose that information. Obviously, we can approach this also from the SA perspective in a slightly different way, because the standards are there, the taxonomy is there, but we can adapt it in a way how we will agree as a community in South Africa that we want to adapt it. So potentially we can think of maybe predefining like a set of closed members, so we can reuse, for example, the risk and opportunities axis, and, you know, have a engagement with the stakeholders representing different industries, and decide on predefining these lists of risk or other aspects that are kind of open at the level of the ISSB taxonomy. So yeah, the options, there are quite a few of them. I guess once the final taxonomy is out, we may expect also some slight changes to the one that we are seeing right now in the proposed taxonomy. So I guess that the safest to say would be that we shall still wait for some review of the feedback by the foundation. They will probably publish some sort of a summary of what they received from the market and how the taxonomy can still evolve both technically and content-wise. I don't think so, because the standards are already issued and adopted. But we'll see how it goes, and for sure there will be a more extensive discussions needed when we will be introducing that at the CIPC level. Yeah, so I hope this provides some at least more reassurance, but yeah, there are some unknowns still. Okay. So if there are no further questions, I will move on to the next difference that we have compared to the accounting taxonomy, which is the application of extensible enumeration and the specification in its version 2.0. This is actually something which is quite new in the IFRS space, but again, thanks to the CIPC and also looking into the future and applying those different specifications that are available out there, the extensible enumeration is not something new in the context of the CIPC and NSA reporting, because we have the extensible enumeration since the very beginning, on when the taxonomy was defined back in and published back in 2018. The difference is that there was a new version of the specification, because originally CIPC was using extensible enumeration 1.0. While the ISSB SDT taxonomy will use the extensible enumeration 2.0. Lucky for us is that during this weekend, when we'll be going live with the taxonomy for 2023, you already know that the extensible enumeration 2.0 was introduced at the level of the CIPC taxonomy. So we are always trying to get ahead of things and try to introduce those new specs to also prepare the market for things like we are noticing right now in the context of the SDT taxonomy, where different jurisdictions that were not using so far extensible enumeration may have much more difficulties than the ones in South Africa, which is great for us. But one thing that I wanted to stress out here, actually two maybe things that I wanted to stress out here, are specifically what type of enumerations are introduced, and maybe for those who are new to these technicalities, because we know that not only the software vendors are available in this meeting. Extensible enumeration is basically a specification of XBRL that allow us to create drop-down lists. So basically, predefined selections that the entities may take when reporting a given disclosure, given information requirement. Now, the extensible enumeration 2.0 was introduced by XBRL International to mostly cater for one thing that was missed out. Maybe not missed out, not needed at the time when the 1.0 specification was released. The ability to create the drop-down lists that will allow for multi-choice selection. Basically, so defining a couple of options, few more options from a list of all the available options. So that is referred to as enumeration set, and the enumeration sets are actually already embedded into the proposed taxonomy for SDT. I think that we are also applying this in one or two places in. No, it's actually no. This is not under the CIPC. Under the CIPC, we just have a single choice enumeration. So indeed, this is something that the vendors should investigate within their development team, be available also for the users of your software. The tricky thing is, and this is probably something that that will soon appear thanks to the introduction of the enumeration sets and enumerations in the SDT taxonomy, is that as of current, there are no dedicated transformation rules for inline XBRL in terms of facts fed as enumerations. So the transformation rules, for those who are not aware, are the kind of functions that you can apply on a given text or number that is present or visible in your human readable report. So in this XHTML layer, so the information on how you like to disclose it. And thanks to the transformation rule will be able to transform this format of a text, like for example, date. You can write the date using, I don't know, the full name of the month, September, using actually the word September and not marking this as 09. So it allows this data to be actually transformed to an XBRL valid format, because XBRL is a technical language and it has certain constraints. One of the constraints are the data type for elements. So these things that you can see here, like string, enumeration, text block, GAG emissions, whatsoever. So these data types will actually express or define how we can actually measure a given information, whether it's a text, whether this is a decimal value, whether this is a monetary value that it needs to be assigned with a currency attribute. It all depends on how you define that, and the date format is technical and hence not necessarily always used in the human versions of the report. That's why the transformation rules are needed, so that the human layer, a human readable layer, would be maintained as human readable and not containing any particular technicalities which are important from the XBRL perspective, but not necessarily important or even understandable from the perspective of business users and humans. So the problem with the extensible enumerations is that there is no transformation rule, and the fact value under extensible enumeration 2.0 actually contains the full URI under which the given domain of enumeration options is defined, plus the technical name of the element, so not the label. The problem is that if we would make a selection and try to present it in a human readable format, that would become unreadable to the business users. And in the case of Cynthia, that would not be understandable by the auditors, because there would be just a string of technical characters that without XBRL knowledge would not make any sense. And this is something that I'm pretty sure will be soon addressed, since it is becoming more and more applied in these different taxonomies. But just to stress this, that such problem might exist, which could be obviously addressed through the use of, I don't know, hidden section of the XBRL report, where we will simply hide those technicalities so that the humans will not need to read that, but the machines will still be able to access that information. But again, I'm mentioning that because this is something that we will probably need to lobby with the XBRL International, with the XBRL Standards Board, as a CIPC, as a community, as a different set of working groups, and there will be actually a good opportunity to do so, because in actually 2 or 3 weeks' time, there will be a Data Amplified conference happening in Zurich, organized by XBRL International. That is after 3 years of online meetings after the COVID, will be actually the very first on-site meeting where the community will be able to discuss those crucial aspects, especially also in the context of the ESG. I will be attending that conference, and one of my agenda points is actually to push for such transformation rule to become available in the next version of the transformation registry. So whenever we'll get some new information around that, we'll of course share it with the CIPC, which can pass on later on to the SSP panel in South Africa. But also feel free to be joining us at the Data Amplified conference in Zurich, which is happening on the 16th and 17th of October. Yes, this topic is quite technical, so I'm not expecting much of the questions. However, if you have any, just please talk.
Hi, Michael. Yes, sorry, just on transformation rules. That's a problem, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it's like you are creating then a code that cannot be read by human. It's like in a software. So yeah, thank you. You need to lobby that for us in Zurich. It is a problem. Thank you.
Yeah, it is indeed a problem, and I will be actually tackling that from different hats that I'm wearing as part of a member of the working groups through different clients and institutions that we are working with. So we want to make a kind of a fuss around that, so that it become a thing that will need to be quickly addressed. So yes, I promise that here. Publicly that we'll be fighting for that to happen as fast as possible. Thanks, Stefan. Any further questions? I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything on the chat, so I'll move on to the last difference that I wanted to make, which might not be necessarily that difficult for the community of vendors, but considering a different nature of the information being disclosed and more environmental oriented, there is also a need of expressing certain things in different ways that we are used to in the financial space, because in the financial taxonomy we mostly have either monetary items or some decimals or some string or text blocks. However, here I just created some screens with examples of the different new data types that will be used based on the DTR 1.1 data type registry specification, which CIPC also will support from this Sunday, I guess, when the 2023 taxonomy will be out. I'm mentioning that because this is not obvious for the vendors to implement these into their software, especially if they are not used commonly in the reporting frameworks under which these software solutions are working in. But there are quite a few of different measures, if we can call it like that, to provide. Most of them, to be honest, are actually part of the industry metric. So the actual S1 and S2 standards, I think, only have few elements defined as GHG emission item type. Most of these types are, to be honest, a decimal value. So I guess this is a matter, a quick fix that can be done on the level of the software. But what will be important is that you need to also allow for some more sophisticated units to actually measure facts expressed as volume or length or energy whatsoever, because at the XBRL level we have something which is called the unit type registry, which basically defines or predefines a set of measurements, units in which we can express certain information, and this registry actually contains different approaches on how we actually measure, I don't know, the volume or energy or GHG emissions in tons or tons of CO2 or whatever. I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't want to say something stupid, but the UTR actually defines the measurements, and depending also on how for example, CAPC or other regulators in South Africa would like this information to be disclosed, because you may actually require certain type of measurements, certain scaling, certain type of rounding that should be actually applied in terms of disclosing that information. The UTR should be supported fully, especially for those new data types that will appear in the taxonomy. So yeah, that is also quite important. And I also will stop here to see if there are any questions from the vendor community or comments around that, and I'm happy to answer.